Once again, welcome to ICESCR Tools. In continuation from our last video, which was a few weeks ago, for the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, this ICCPR. Today we come to you continuing from that stage on to the next stage, which is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, it's commonplace that in recent years, human rights advocates, activists, lobbyists, human rights lawyers, scholars, human rights is basically taking a lot of stick. One will say from 9/11 up until this time. And there is a fair amount of bad press for human rights advocates. And, you know, it all goes well for the state, but in reality, human rights is not at odds with the state. The purpose of human rights is there as part of the checks and balances in a democratic economy or in a democratic country. To actually help governments do their work and do it well. And when things are going wrong, is the human rights advocates and lawyers that are there to help redress any problems or imbalances within the country or within the states or nations. Just to give you an idea, I think that there's that general consensus that human rights advocates are the ones, you know, looking out for maybe prisoners that are taken in for maybe terrorist or other major offenses. Obviously, all these people have rights, and that is why when there is a problem, these people, regardless of what they have done, their rights needs to be defended as well. And so there is that thing where human rights are being basically placed out of context. It's as if that's all that they do, but in reality the scope of human rights is quite broad, and it does affect every aspect of daily life. So for example, if you are denied access to justice, is human rights advocates that comes in to help you. If you have problems with your housing, poor housing, poor education system, forced evictions, if you're taken into police custody and you come under any form of abuse, these are all part of the work that human rights does. For example, you will probably notice issues like the Hillsborough disaster, where there was a problem, and obviously the aggrieved families were not basically given the right information, or people that may have been at fault were not brought to account. And so all these aspects of life is human rights advocates and lawyers that goes in to help families get justice. Some of the other issues to do with human rights will be, once again, your right to a healthy environment. So, you know, things to do with corporates that are basically extracting natural resources excessively and causing environmental damage, or I would say not even just extracting, but it's the irresponsible. That is, there isn't a foolproof plan of, we're doing this, when we finish, this is how we're going to repair the land, or this is how we're going to use the land for. So all these are things that human rights advocate come in to help people with. So for example, you may also have a situation where, you know, to do with indigenous people, they may be living on a land and then they get removed by force. Their properties are taken, their lands are taken. These are all things that human rights advocates or lawyers will get involved and lobby, and also, you know, prepare cases for communities, these indigenous communities, to go to court to get their rights restored. And so the reality is that you're also even looking at things like, people who have had their relatives or friends or family taken into police custody and abused. Some of them may die in custody or in prisons without any proper account to the families. These are all issues that are taken on by human rights advocates, lobbyists, and activists. And so it is important that the general public can be so very much involved in supporting human rights advocates, rather than following the sort of bad press and having that negative perspective of matters to do with human rights. Issues, for example, will be something to do with, like, say, the issue with George Floyd, where, somebody's father or uncle will have their neck stood on and, their life ended in that terrible manner. All these things are basically there's that advocacy, that lobbying, that mobilization of people to kind of seek justice in that respect, because many a times we may see these matters as matters that are probably not directly related to us, but trust me, some of these things can come very close to any person at any time. And this is why we want you to be involved, to know your rights. We're basically here to educate, to also promote that human right, so that everyone is aware, and also that people can actually put in that support, especially institutions like Amnesty International and many other NGOs that work in countries abroad, supporting families whose lives may be abused. And so, without further ado, I am just going to go on to basically bring to you the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Now, this was actually adopted on the 16th of December 1966 and actually came into force on the 3rd of January 1976, that is 10 years later. This is when, obviously, when the adaptation comes in, when the nations come together to agree on these international human rights treaties. But they actually take effect or come into force when sufficient mandate, i.e. signatories ratification, is collected from a certain number of nations. Once they get a certain number, then these human rights treaties come into force. And then what then happens is that other nations then continue to join to sort of build up that consensus on a global scale. And so each nation that have signed and ratify this treaty, which is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, are legally bound by the contents of this treaty to their own nation or their own citizens, such that if such rights are then breached by the state, then the individual or an organization or an institution or a company are then able to seek redress for the breach of such international treaties. And as I mentioned before, human rights advocates are not at odds with states. They are basically part of the democratic process of checks and balances within a state or a nation or a country to ensure that these states are doing their work and doing it well. And if they are doing things wrong, it's the advocates that are there to kind of point these things out, so that it creates that awareness and creates that opportunity for things to be corrected for every person within that nation to enjoy a better standard of living. So the preamble of the International Covenant for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which I am actually reading directly from the United Nations Office of the High Commission of Human Rights, SACT. So the preamble says, the state parties to the present covenant, considering that in accordance with the principles proclaimed in the Charter of the United Nations, recognition of the inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Recognizing that these rights derive from the inherent dignity of human persons. Recognizing that in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ideal of free human beings enjoying freedom from fear and want can only be achieved if conditions are created whereby everyone may enjoy his economic, social and cultural rights as well as his civil and political right. Considering the obligation of states under the Charter of the United Nations to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and freedoms, realizing that the individual having duties to other individuals and to community to which he belongs is under a responsibility to strive for the promotion and observance of the rights recognized in the present covenant, agreed upon the following articles. And so, just to maybe elaborate on this, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, when that came into force in the 10th of December 1948, what it was is that this was a non-binding declaration. It's just a declaration, so it was non-binding of the state parties that did recognize this UDHR. And so following on was the ICCPR, of which obviously would have been the previous videos, and then the ICESCR, which is the one that I'm actually reading now. And so now that you have this this aspect of human rights treaty, this is actually a treaty that is signed and ratified by nations. Therefore, they are legally bound to adhere to the contents of the articles of this international treaty. So I will just continue from Article 1 so that you get to know the contents and know what the rights and obligation of your state. Of here is the United Kingdom, what we have actually signed and ratified for. This is also signed by Ghana. A lot of the West African, a lot of countries in the world have actually signed and ratified this international treaty. So Article 1 says that all people have the right of self-determination by virtue of the right they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social and cultural rights. So Article 1 Clause 1 talks about self-determination, and so this may be very applicable to what is actually happening in the Middle East and the rights maybe of the Palestinian people to have their state, and also for Israel to also have their own state. Article 1.2, all people may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligation arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. And so Article 1.2 says that you have a right to basically dispose of your own assets as you wish. Article 1.3 says the state parties to the present covenant, which the United Kingdom is a signatory to, and also Ghana, Nigeria, and so many other countries, including those having responsibilities for the administration of non-self-governing and trust territories, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provision of the Charter of the United Nations. And so then it goes on to say that all member states obviously need to protect the right of self-determination. Now, this article was also very relevant in the times of independence in most of these African countries, that is ending colonial rule and obviously assuming self-determination, of which Ghana in 1957 on the 6th of March gained their independence from British colonial rule. And so these were all the human rights treaties that supported Ghana and many of these African countries to actually gain their independence. And so this goes on to tell you some of the importance of the works of human rights. That human rights is not just people defending, terrorists and things like that. That negative press that human rights have received must be reversed, because human rights is there for everyone to defend all peoples when their rights are being abused by obviously powerful institutions, powerful forces, powerful governments. It is to basically redress the imbalances and also the unequal relations between citizen and state. Article 2 of the International Covenant for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Each state party to the present covenant undertake to take steps individually and through international assistance and cooperation, especially economic and technical, to the maximum of its available resources with a view to achieving progressively the full realization of the rights recognized in the present covenant by all appropriate means, including particularly the adaptation of legislative measures. And so Article 2.1 says that every state must use their resources at their maximum capacity and in a progressive manner, that is progressive realization, to basically ensure that they make all necessary provisions for their citizens to enjoy their full rights and benefits. Okay, and also obviously doing so in a legislative manner, that is, it should all be enshrined in the national laws. So Article 2.2 says the state parties to the present covenant undertake to guarantee that the rights enunciated in the present covenant will be exercised without discrimination of any kind as to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national or social origin, property, both birth or other status. So it says that obviously the state must guarantee that in the exercising of this the rights in this covenant, that people should not come under any form of discrimination. And so you may probably know that you may probably see these things when you go to a lot of maybe major employment places. You will see their non-discriminatory rules displayed. Sometimes it is displayed on a board for everyone to see in local authorities. All these are very evident. So all these are works of international human rights. And so there should be no discrimination based on your race, on your sex, on your language, on your religion, political opinion, your gender, your national or social origin, that all must be treated equal. And so, yes, Article 2.3 says developing countries with due regards to human rights and their national economy may determine to what extent they will guarantee the economic rights recognized in the present covenant to non-nationals. And so it sort of seems to make a leeway or some sort of provision or a discretion for developing countries in determining how much rights they want to give to non-nationals. The only reason why this provision was made was the fact that obviously developing nation lacked the sort of economic resources or economic power to sometimes deliver these rights in its entirety. And so this is why they have this leeway given to them. And it's also very evident in the charter, the African Charter, which it appears that didn't make so much provision of the details of the rights, human rights. However, it did make references that nations within those African states should adhere to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which basically was just a declaration, and therefore if these states did not maybe comply or adhere to them, then there wasn't any sort of legal obligation for them to do so. So Article 3 of the ICESCR states that the state parties to the present covenant undertake to ensure the equal rights of men and women to the employment of all economic, social, and cultural rights set forth in the present covenant. And so once again, this International Human Rights Treaty once again makes that provision so that there is no discrimination between a man and a woman in terms of employment, in terms of social and cultural and even political rights, so that all are equal before the law and access to all these benefits. Yes. So Article 4 states that state parties to the present covenant recognize that in the employment of those rights provided by the state in conformity with the present covenant, the state may subject such rights only to such limitations as determined by law, only in so far as this may be compatible with the nature of these rights and solely to the purpose of promoting the general welfare in a democratic society. And so what I could probably just pick from this is just basically the sort of promotion that states should encourage the promotion of this International Human Rights Treaty. Article 5.1 says nothing in the present covenant may be interpreted as implying for any state, group or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights or freedom recognized herein, or at their limitation to a greater extent than is provided for in the present covenant. And so here Article 5.1 is actually saying that no state party or entity within a state may act in a way that may be destructive or obstructive to the exercise of these rights and freedoms enshrined in this international treaty. No restriction upon or derogation from any of the fundamental human rights recognized or existing in any country in virtue of law, convention, regulation, or customs shall be admitted on the pretext that the present covenant does not recognize such rights, or that it recognizes them to a lesser extent. So none of these rights, they sort of, I would say, possibly is referring to the ICCPR and the ICESR, that they are all of equal footing and must be protected by the state accordingly. I mean, the reality is that because of the sovereign nature of states and their ability to either ratify or basically exclude themselves from an international treaty, somehow limits the level at which these international bodies can basically force these nations to do things right. It's sort of I think there's a lot more sort of diplomacy and that sort of cooperation in the international arena. That is what really influences these states to do these things right, and there isn't any other better way. So this is the thing. United Nations themselves, they do get a lot of stake in the manner that maybe they are sort of selective in the way that they respond to issues globally. However, there isn't any other way to do anything, and this is why we must continue to strive and continue to hope that things can get better. Article 6. Article 6.1 says, the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right to work, which includes the right of everyone to the opportunity to gain his living by work which he freely chooses or accepts, and will take appropriate steps to safeguard this right. Article 6.2 says, the steps to be taken by a state party to the present covenant to achieve the full realization of this right shall include technical and vocational guidance and training programs, policies and techniques to achieve steady economic, social, and cultural development and full and productive employment under conditions safeguarding fundamental policies and fundamental political and economic freedom to the individual. And so this Article 6.2 talks about your right to work. So gone are the days when people were in servitude or people were maybe forced to work. These International Human Rights Treaty Article 6.1 and 6.2 expresses the state's responsibility to ensure the right to work, that each person should have that opportunity to do work at their own will, at their own choice. And those rights are safeguarded by the state. And the state also, through progressive realization, as mentioned in the earlier articles, they also have a responsibility to ensure that there is that educational or technical or vocational training programs to help the citizens of that nation to realize that full employment capacity, and also to enjoy that steady economic, social, and cultural development. So that is a state responsibility under this international treaty. So Article 7. Article 7 states that state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to the employment of just and favorable conditions of work, which ensures in particular, paragraph A, remuneration which provides all workers as a minimum, with fair wages, equal remuneration for work of equal value, without distinction of any kind, in particular, women being guaranteed conditions of work not inferior to those enjoyed by men, and equal pay for equal work. So I will, at this, I will sort of pause a little bit and expand on this. So Article 7, 1, as we see here, paragraph A, talks about obviously your right to work and to have that minimum pay. So these are not just granted by the states because they want to grant it, you know, things to do with minimum pay, but they actually enshrined in international treaty, international human rights law, and this is why the states are obliged to ensure that there is that minimum wage, and the wage should be fair, should be equal, and it shouldn't be discriminatory, i.e. being a person, being a man or a woman, they should all be treated equally, and in the type of work that they do and how they are paid. I think that in the past there has been issues. I don't know how the situation is like now, i.e. statistics in supporting this situation. But obviously in the UK there was a period of time that, you know, this equal pay thing or pay gap between the male and the female was very evident. But it appears that in recent times these gaps have been closed up so that everyone receives the same sort of pay doing the same job. So paragraph A2, a decent living for themselves and their families in accordance with the provision of the present covenant. Safe and healthy working conditions, equal opportunity for everyone to be promoted in his employment to an appropriate higher level, subject to no consideration other than those of seniority and competence. Rest, leisure, and reasonable limitation of work hours and periodic holiday with pay, as well as remuneration for public holidays. And so once again, this actually talks about obviously working in a safe environment, and it also talks about obviously your right to also be promoted in the work that you do. I mean, these are kind of a lot more challenging on the ground because you may be in a job and doing a good job and you never get promoted because maybe somebody have got better connections than you, personality. There are a host of reasons why such breaches may occur. However, if an individual is able to prove that you know, that they have not been promoted for one reason or the other, then they do obviously have the right to basically seek that redress from their employer, either in a national or in an international court. Obviously, you also have that right to rest and have leisure activity. Right, so at this stage, I think we will bring this video to an end. Thank you for watching ICESCR Talks. Remember to share, like this video, add your comments and contributions, and get involved with human rights because it is your right. Thank you for watching.